Hello, this is Alan Wheeler with a short video today. And recently on this channel, I've been using tarot to discuss spiritual issues. And today I've pulled two Oham sticks, the Irish symbols, and three cards from the new Mythic tarot. And I'll be using those to help me reflect on guidance. Often we seek spiritual guidance or just guidance in life decisions, and so that's the topic. By way of introduction, until I run out of things or start forgetting, I've been introducing items from my altar, and here I have a candle burning, and you can't quite see it in the screen here because it looks like one big brightness there in the candle, but it's actually three wicks, each with a separate flame there in one candle, and it reminds me of uh, the Trinity, the triple goddess, and how we often see unity and diversity, sometimes three things in one. And I can think of just represented here on my altar at least three triple goddesses here. Um, One might be Isis, as I have some cards from the Isis Oracle here. The Morrigan, and there's conflicting versions, but is often seen as a triple goddess, and Hecate, who is featured in the New Mythic Tarot. I discussed in a video I made yesterday on the Moon card. And here she's seen with three faces. I believe they're looking in the three directions at a crossroads where two roads diverge. And she has the three-headed dog with her here in this depiction, but of course she fits in well with this topic as a goddess of the crossroads, turning points, decision making. So there's two schools of thought that I've come across as far as guidance, and one emphasizes choice, and I call that the wisdom theory, and that's the idea that we look at all the alternatives and apply wisdom to those, and there's many possible pathways that we could go. Another approach is kind of the being led theory, I guess I could call it. And that would be more along the lines of seeking intuition, kind of prompting, divination to tap into what is the best path, and being led by the heart, perhaps, or by spirit, being spirit led. Some people use that phrase. So, as usual, I'm probably a proponent of blending those two ideas, and just it might have been earlier today or very recently, I even translated the words out of my heart as though from the Morrigan, to say, don't follow what a voice just tells you to do, not even mine. And so that would be the extreme of being spirit-led, to the point of foolishness, perhaps. And so I think the balance is don't despise intuition and prophecies and such necessarily, but test everything with wisdom. And so, with that in mind, I'm reminded of the kind of biblical principle, which I think holds up in any realm, that seek confirmation. A thing is established by two or three witnesses. And so try to get confirmation from multiple sources, especially when it's a big decision. Maybe for small things, maybe we can flip a coin. But for those big decisions, um, perhaps we can get counsel from others, especially people we feel are wise. But would we want to just do what other people tell us? Probably not. So we could look to written wisdom, maybe sacred books that are dear to us. Um, and I think that when uh, people ask themselves, what would Buddha do? What would Jesus do? They're applying that kind of thinking. We can look at consensus reality. So, all things being equal, take the job that pays the most money. So, there may be other factors, but we can kind of look to consensus reality. Also, another source, peace in our hearts and our own conscience, uh, our own sense of right and wrong and what's right for us. So if all of those sources are in agreement, then we have a really solid confirmation. Now, this idea was kind of developed further as I was walking around our house the other day in the full moon, and an analogy um, that applies to this presented itself to me. And as I was walking, I noticed there was across the street in a neighbor's yard. Through the trees, I could see a green light. And as I walked the scene, every round, I noticed more details. And near the street, near the end of the driveway of that house, there were two lights shining. Um, and it could have been the moon reflecting off some things. I'm not sure the source, but I could see two clear lights shining there. And on another round, I saw that there were also two lights, very similar, shining on the porch close to the house. And so as I walked, I reflected um, that the green light, that sense to go for something, to do something, the go ahead, um, is one kind of, it's kind of the calling, that initial sense to do something. But just responding, rushing ahead and responding to that initial prompting might be like listening to that voice without testing. And so I saw the two pairs of lights, the two sets of two, uh, as kind of a charting out confirmation for me. So two of those were confirmation close to home or in the heart, is the way I was looking at it. And so whether that's the conscience um, and the uh, peace in the heart, or the desire, the desire of the heart to do something, which is sometimes that's a very good confirmation. Um, but is it also ethical? So kind of that double um, witness, that two confirmations close to home within the individual. And then out by the road, I saw that as the more of the outworking or the walking, the practical um, outworking of that green light. And so those could be things like, is the money there to do it? Is the um, do others agree that this looks like a good path for you? And so those more outward um, confirmations. And so with everything in place, as I was walking around, I felt so that this is kind of um, perhaps guidance. There's both wisdom and maybe some of the synchronicities and other kinds of prompting. So with all that in mind, I drew 2 Oham sticks and 3 tarot cards. So let's have a look at those. And the first Oham stick I drew was this one, and that is Straith or Strafe. I'm sure my pronunciation is not right, but it stands for the blackthorn tree, and I've drawn this one at other times recently, and it can represent adversity. Sometimes it can be associated with the dark goddess, and there's both the thorns on that blackthorn tree, those sharp points, and it also bears a fruit as well. So I reflected on this, and really that there's 2 aspects that came to mind from this. One is that the many of the dark gods and goddesses, we hear it said that they call you. Um, you don't necessarily just um, tromp up to them and introduce yourself. I've heard that time and time again from various people, and regardless whether you um, um, believe in supernatural entities or see them as aspects of a pantheistic universe or the higher self, however you see that, um, there is a sense that there's a calling that we could even use in the secular sense that is a little bit different from simple planning, from just plotting out your course. Something really grabs you, something really attracts you and draws you in. The second aspect of this strafe, the blackthorn um, Oham symbol, is that when we do face adversity, that sense of calling is very helpful to have, to look back on, to remember when, uh, say, you're a teacher in the classroom and you're having a difficult day, to remember that this is my uh, vocation, this is my calling. Uh, can be very helpful to have that and to have almost built an altar of remembrance that this is your chosen path, whether you see that as a calling um, in the spiritual sense or not. So guidance can be very important uh, later, after the decision has been made. Now, the other stick fell out, um, but I felt it was very appropriate, so I'm going to bring that in as well. And this one, um, let me refresh my memory here. It's hard to pronounce. Ingatal, I believe it is. And it stands for the reed. And the reed um, is straight and tall. It can be used to make arrows. And so it reminded me of this focus, this arrow-like purpose that a direction gives us, that a calling can give us. Also, the reed is very short-lived, and it grows by the water, and it's renewed each spring. It grows anew each spring. And so sometimes our guidance can be for a season, for a time or a season. And maybe we need to revisit that decision periodically and renew that sense of direction, um, whether annually or otherwise. Um, and so the reed, the ingatal symbol reminds me of that. Well, let's look at the cards from the uh, New Mythic Tarot. And the first one I drew was the Three of Swords. In this scene, the New Mythic Tarot, um, the artwork is not uh, sophisticated but to me it's appropriate for the mythic retellings that it's presenting. And so myths, they don't necessarily rely on like art epics, on fancy storytelling and beautiful language. They're more primal, and so I'm quite satisfied with the. It doesn't. You don't need a Rembrandt painting necessarily to carry the power of the myth. But here we see Clytemnestra here in the purple dress, and Agamemnon being killed here by her and Orestes, the son. And so we see the three swords piercing his heart. And so I think the bringing in the Greek myth just really resonates with me and brings forth that energy of the Three of Swords in a very powerful way. That heart-piercing experience that I think sometimes is the source of our guidance, in fact, and the what motivates us many times. So, as I mentioned, we should look to what pierces our hearts, and one of those lights of inner guidance, I think, is very, very important. And of course, swords can represent messages and communication. And so, although this kind of guidance or wisdom can be very intense and gut wrenching, it definitely should not be ignored as we're looking for guidance. The next two cards were from the suit of Pentacles. And in the New Mythic Tarot, the Pentacles 1 through 10 follow the story of Daedalus, the master craftsman. And so I drew the 10 of Pentacles, which shows the end of his life here and the fruit of his labors. And I think that this card is reminding me that when we seek guidance, when we make a decision, we should look to the end. So this card came in the middle position. rather than the third position. So to me, this says to where we are now, look to the end result. And is our goal, are we making the decision because it's something that will bring this lasting fruitfulness, this legacy, what we really want to leave behind? And so we see all the generations here represented, as often is the case on the Ten of Pentacles. And whether it's time, talent, treasure, whatever it is in the earthly realm that we want to be the fruit of our path, have that in mind in the initial stages at the crossroads. Now, the last card I drew was the Knight of Pentacles, and I wrote this down. This figure represents a Greek character, Aristeas, and he was famous for cultivating cheese, olives, bees for traveling, and teaching his methods. And I think this card speaks to me that in the decision making, keep in mind those simple tasks. He's not famous for being a great dragon slayer. He doesn't have the hubris as some of the other Greek heroes, but in simplicity and kind of lowly decisions, he brought this kind of lasting blessing and fruitfulness to the lands. And so rather than following money making schemes that get you rich overnight, get rich quick schemes, and things that feed the ego and may not be realistic, just doing those routine, those realistic choices that do bear fruit in the real life, in the physical realm. So those seem like some good principles for seeking guidance to me. I'll stop here because before the video gets lengthier. And as always, I hope you find connection with people in your life, with online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that may be. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.